In 1915, a Sanskrit scholar sat down to translate the most famous text in Hatha Yoga and got one word wrong. 100 years later, tens of millions of people are making ocean sounds in yoga classes around the world. For almost a century, people have been taught to make sound in the throat because everybody believed it's an ancient technique called Ujjayi. If you don't know what I'm talking about, it's a common breathing sound in yoga classes that reminds me of... I've spent years inside these traditions, studying the original Sanskrit texts. I will put the actual 1915 page on the screen and we'll read it together. By the end, you'll know what those verses were really saying. Here's the word at the center of it. Nāḍībhyām. That ending, bhyām, tells you that it's not singular and not plural, referring to exactly two. The 1915 translator hit this word and didn't know what to do with it. He couldn't tell what the text was pointing at. So he rendered it as the larynx, the voice box. Nobody has two larynxes. But because that one word got flattened, more of us than not have been taught to squeeze the throat in yoga class. And here's the frustrating part. True yoga loves the opposite. Slow, effortless breathing through the nose. No strain, no forced sound. The modern science of the nervous system keeps pointing back to exactly this. And so does the tradition itself before the mistranslation got in. So don't take my word for it. Let's take the word of the ancient yogis. Here's the page I promised you. In 1915, a translator named Pancham Sinh published the first widely read English edition of the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, the 15th century manual that defines this practice. His line reads, and I'm quoting, "Having closed the opening of the nadi, the larynx, the air should be drawn in such a way that it goes touching from the throat to the chest, making noise while passing." Close the larynx, make noise. You know this one. It's the Ujjayi breath you were taught in class. And unfortunately it's wrong on two counts. Count one is that dual, two channels, not one throat. The pair has many names, Ida and Pingala. Those are the two prana channels of the old yoga philosophy. Sun and moon are the symbols the tradition connects with these two opposing forces. And the whole of Hatha Yoga is the work of these two. The word Hatha itself is treated as a kind of mantra for this pair. Ha and Tha, two seed sounds for the two opposing forces inside you. And Hatha Yoga is the practice of harmonizing them. So when the translation collapsed the two into one, it didn't just miss a grammar point. It erased the Hatha, the two. This two is the whole story. We come back to it. So the second point is the throat. Here's the exact word. The verse says the breath is felt from the kantha, the throat. Sinh read that as physical voice box, but in this literature, kantha is also the throat center, what later the text calls vishuddha, and it has a precise shape, 16 petals, on each petal one of the 16 vowels of Sanskrit. Hold on to this 16, we come back to it too. So how did squeeze your throat Ujjayi end up in every studio on earth? The modern flowing styles with breath sync to the movement and the audible ocean sound trace to a handful of teachers in 20th century Mysore. Krishnamacharya and his students Pattabhi Jois and BKS Iyengar. I guess nobody knows exactly how the error traveled from 1915 page into their rooms, but I can show you the fingerprint. The version most people practice today, with the sound made on purpose, matches the mistranslation. It doesn't match the verse. And the scholar Mark Singleton spent years in the archives and landed on something uncomfortable. The athletic, posture-heavy yoga the world practices was made in Mysore in 20th century, not revived, invented. The mat we all roll out is modern, which means the breath on it can be modern too. But the verse underneath it isn't. And the verse is about to stop being about your throat at all. Let's go back to the word he deleted. The entire practice is the meeting of the two. Apana, the downward flow, and prana, the upward flow. And I should emphasize, we are not talking about air here. We are talking about subtle information channels in the body. And 4 verses before Ujjayi, the text says it plainly. Raise the apana, bring prana down from the throat, and let them meet. And what happens when they meet? The yogi, it says, freed from old age, becomes 16 years old. What? That's a fountain of youth line. But look, the same throat with 16 petals, the same 16. In this tradition, 16 is the number of completeness. The moon has 16 faces. The perfected one is called the 16. Becomes 16 means whole, joined to the full field of sound. Be patient, I will explain that sound. Just look at the shape of the whole thing. Every layer of this practice is a pair held in tension, and the name for all of it, yoga, comes from the yuj, to yoke, to join, the union of the two. So here's what this video is actually about. In yoga, reality is sound. I mean it the way the tradition meant it, and I'm asking you to take it more seriously than it usually gets taken. I don't mean the sound you hear with your ears, the air vibrating against eardrum. That kind of sound happens inside the world. This one is underneath it. I personally heard it first as a teenager. I used to get sleep paralysis. I'd wake up in the night into a kind of in-between state. I couldn't move, not quite awake, and there was a sound, a buzzing in the ears, rising, and with it hallucinations, specific, vivid, and pretty scary too. I had no word for it then. The psychonauts know all about this sound. It's commonly reported that a DMT experience begins with it. A buzzing, a high whine, and chirping. And then reality collapses. The world you were looking at falls away. So what exactly is collapsing? Think about your phone. What it shows you, apps and icons and glowing screen, is not what's actually happening. What's actually happening is electricity moving through transistors and wire. You could never use that directly. So there's an operating system, a surface that turns the raw thing into something you can use. Your sensory world is an operating system. The colors, the solidity, the sound in the air, that's the interface. And a cognitive scientist named Donald Hoffman argues exactly this. Evolution built perception to keep you alive, not to show you reality. The yogis went one step further. They said, behind the interface, the real reality itself is sound. They called the absolute Nāḍībhyām, reality as sound. And every so often, in sleep paralysis, on psychedelics, the operating system flickers. They learned how to collapse the operating system and get to the source. And when you get there, you hear the sound. This is where the yogis have always worked, behind the interface. And this is the sound the Hatha Yoga Pradipika is actually pointing at. Not just in the Ujjayi verse, but in the final chapter. It's called Nāda, the inner sound. And its other name is Anahata, the unstruck sound. Unstruck because nothing has to hit anything to make it. Every sound you've ever heard came from two things striking. Air on eardrum, a string on the air. This one has no two. It's the sound underneath the two. And the text is explicit in the line that should end the entire debate. The sound is not produced. It already exists. You only learn to listen. So picture the real instruction. The two currents meet, and the meeting stills the system. The interface goes quiet, and in the quiet you start noticing what was sounding the whole time. The text even maps it. At first, like an ocean, then like a thunder, then as it settles, like a bell, a conch, then finer, a flute, a vina, the hum of a bee, and then it says, the mind does what a bee does inside a flower. It stops caring about anything else, and it dissolves into the sound. They had a word for that dissolving, laya, the mind melting back into the sound it came from, and on the far side of laya, samadhi. The mistranslation told you to make a sound with your throat. The tradition tells you something completely different. The sound is the floor of reality. The practice is first taking control of the operating system and then switching off the interface until you can hear it. The sound was always there and it created you. And once you see what happened to this one word, you start seeing it everywhere. The most famous line in all of yoga is Patanjali's definition, yoga chitta vritti nirodha. It gets sold to you as calm your busy mind. The technical meaning is far more radical, the complete cessation of the operating system, the off switch for the interface. Over and over, the same move, a precise technical internal instruction flattened into a posture or mood, a wellness tip, because the modern world has mostly lost the ability to even perceive the inner dimension. So when it translates, it can only see the outside. It turns dissolve into the sound behind reality, into make a sound in your throat. So tell me in the comments, have you ever heard it? I suspect many of you have. And of course, if you want to actually align your practice with the ancient tradition, learn how to get behind the interface step by step, the place is ancientscience.com, link below.